Okay, let's kick it off. So we have some attendees joining now. So let's get started and welcome everyone to this webinar here. We'll talk about we'll talk about sales methodologies. We'll talk about mutual action plans. And I have invited John Buss. Welcome so much to the show here. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. It's going to be fun.
Perfect. And John has a lot of experience from running bigger, smaller teams, anything, and I've been most likely implementing more sales methodologies than I have been I don't know what. So let's hope that we can squeeze up some really good tactical knowledge from you, John. And I'll try to provide a little bit too. So let's hope for that.
I hate it when you say that, by the way, because it makes me sound really, really old. So, but thanks anyway.
only 40 years old. No worries. And for everyone joining, so you'll see here we have the chat. In the chat, maybe Victoria and Frederica from my end can write something in it. You use the chat to ask any questions you want. We'll try to answer them on the fly, or we'll gather them in the end. We will try to be as concrete as possible, right, John? I said no fluff. So let's try to be that. And if nothing else, let's try to spread some energy through the camera here together during this session. I'm a very product-oriented person, so we will combine this tactical knowledge with some product information, being some demo things where I'll get some insights from you, John. And more or less that's it. We'll run 30, 40 minutes, and hopefully we'll fill that time with a lot of information for you to bring with you, and maybe something that you can start implementing already tomorrow or today, who knows, and get some goodies out of it. But to warm up a little bit, John, just a question that I get a little bit now and then. I'm not a salesperson, but I've managed to do a couple of sales deals myself. Do you think that a good salesperson are born to do sales, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting one because people say that they're born salespeople. So do I think people are born to do sales? No. Okay. So I think, and especially in today's day and age, you can coach, you can teach people to sell. But do I think that people have characteristics that maybe they're born with that help them sell? So people that are outgoing, people that are naturally curious, people that are charming, all of these things that are characteristics that I think can help build relationships because, irrespective of some of the things that we're going to talk about with process, methodology, people still buy from people. So I think those things are really important. But honestly, I see so many people becoming great at sales. I think people who are evangelists are great sellers, founders are great sellers. But I also think that people who are organized, people who are diligent, people who are very resourceful and very disciplined, they're the people that we're really seeing being successful at sales at the moment. And I think this discipline is what's differentiating good sellers from average sellers at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. And when I succeed to do sales, I find myself being very passionate about the thing that I'm talking about. In my case, GetAccept, since I'm the founder, but also the product itself. And I just can find myself figuring out things, and then I'm an engineer in the background, so I love to solve problems. So that combination, and suddenly someone asks like, okay, but how much does this cost? And then I understand, hey, I'm actually selling. Did I follow any methodology? I don't know, but I do believe also that following methodology is something that successful sales reps do, and we have some data on that. I'll start sharing my screen here because I have some thoughts I wanted to bounce with you here, so beware with me. So, John, this is some data, and I'll tell you what it is. It says that 17% of reps are actually standing out for the 81% of the quota, according to the EPSTA report. And one other data point on the same topic is more or less this, that yesterday we had about 20% of our reps were top performers, 10% were bottom performers. Now, today, 4% are top performers, 28% are bottom performers. I mean, what's the reason behind this? Is this that all the good sales reps have disappeared into new roles as COVID hit, or what happened here? What do you think is the reasoning behind these numbers, John?
Yeah, so I mean, I think anyone who's on this call who's in sales will know that this is interesting, but this is not new news, right? So sales has got harder over the last couple of years. We all know that. It's well documented. We don't need to go into that now. You know, buyers are more thoughtful about making technology investments. It's harder to get their attention. It's harder to get budget, and therefore there's less people attaining quotas that they used to attain a few years ago. So that's a lot of macroeconomic that's going on at the moment. So that's why we see this. And I think this is why, going back to the original point we were just talking about, you have to get back to basics, right? You've got to tighten up on everything because the top sellers are still performing well because they're really being focused. They're being focused on ICP. They're not wasting their time on deals that aren't going to convert. They're focused on a rigorous sales process. They're leveraging the entire team. You know, they're using their team in order to close deals. And I think, you know, that's really where we're seeing those top performers. But, you know, that data point that there's less people attaining than there were before, you know, it's kind of no great surprise. But, you know, this is all about how do we now elevate people to become better? And I saw this with Winning by Design. They're talking about, you know, how can people be enabled better? How can they be coached better? How can they follow better processes? You know, how do we make sure that sales leaders are coaches first and foremost?
Yeah.
And make sure that individual and tailored coaching is going on to improve people's levels.
Yeah. Actually, I'm running a deal myself now, and we talked about this. And we also did this big research where we asked a lot of sales leaders, like, what's your biggest challenge now? And lack of sales methodology was coming up as one of the biggest ones. And I was asking them, like, but didn't you run a sales methodology? And everyone was like, yeah, of course we were, but were we following it? So it's more like, when it was the heydays, maybe you didn't have to follow it in that same structure because you maybe were an order, like it was more like sending order forms. But one thing that the data also tells was this, and this is why we maybe are talking about the sales methodology, like top performers are 5x more likely to use a methodology and follow a methodology than someone that isn't. Would you say this being true?
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. I think it comes back to that point around people that are disciplined, process oriented, that understand what's working for other people by looking at data and then applying that, are the ones that have been more successful. So, you know, if I think about one sales methodology, which we'll probably talk about a little bit more later, you know, MEDDPICC, you know, those that are really out there understanding pain. And actually MEDDPICC talks about implicating the pain. People that are truly understanding what metrics are really important for a buyer. People that truly understand the importance of having a champion. Like, they're the ones that are doing well. Because they're really getting into the science around it. You know, sales is science and art, right? When I grew up selling, it was pretty much art because there wasn't this whole industry around sort of sales processes. It was art, and you were taught the processes. Now you taught the process and you build your art around that. That's the way I see it anyway.
Yeah. What do you think, if I'm sitting here now, either as a rep or a manager, what do you think is the main thing that I should focus on when it comes to sales methodologies? Like, what should I pick out from the different things that needs to be done?
So what are the key things? I think, you know, what do I see as the attributes of most successful salespeople? So I think the top ones are very organized and they're very structured. I think the top ones prepare incredibly well and they research incredibly well. So the number of times I've been called on a call and then I say, you need to brief me in advance of the call. And they say, well, brief you on what? We're just going to go on and do discovery. And it's like, this is going to end in disaster if you haven't actually done the table stakes of understanding what's going on with the customer before you actually get into the call. I think top salespeople are curious, they're consultative. I think, you know, the top salespeople are mapping their solution to a strategic imperative. I think they network heavily, which I think you're going to be running a session on over the next week or two around number of stakeholders that you need in a deal. So I see the most successful are those that map multiple stakeholders and don't do this dumb thing of being single-threaded. I think top sellers agree the next steps and expectations, like they're always moving a deal forwards. Now, that's not necessarily all around the methodology, but there's some of the, I would say, some of the key characteristics that I see that in good salespeople.
Yeah, and I agree. And sometimes I've been hearing, but also saying myself that salespeople, and now I say myself, since I sometimes consider myself as being salespeople, we are a little bit lazy, right? But I think that the ones that I've seen being really successful are very organized around how they're doing sales. That was why I asked the first question, like, are you born to do sales? No, I don't think. I think if you are organized, if you just do the things that the methodologies say that you should do, it's not like guaranteed that you win, but you will increase the probability of winning.
Agreed. I completely agree. And I think that's why, we see more people coming into sales because they can learn this process. They can be structured. They can follow, these rules. I still think, though, that fundamental, people still buy from people. So let's not think that we're going to train up a whole load of robots that follow a process and a methodology and we're going to be super successful. You've got to have a personality. You've got to have character. You've got to build relationship. You've got to build rapport. You've got to have empathy. There's all those great things as well that come with it. But honestly, the process at the moment is the thing that's keeping us on the tracks.
Maybe the robots will do that also, have empathy. But let's go to the next one. So let's go down to the weeds here. Like, now we want to implement the sales methodology. I mean, there's tons of them, tons. Like I pulled up one and I think I saw 40 different ones. Where do you recommend the sales manager start when you think about, okay, which methodology should we use? Is it the deal side, the complexity of what you're selling? Is it the length of sales cycle? How should we think? Like, what's the criteria I should look for, and then go and look for methodology? Or maybe I'm totally wrong on it. Maybe I should just start at some other end.
Well, you might disagree with me on this one, but my view on this around methodology is don't get too fixated about which one, because ultimately you just need one. They pretty much all do the same. If you're thinking about Spin, Sandler, Challenger, MEDDPICC, they're creating a framework that you can operate in and that you run your sales process through, right? So I would be picking one that I feel comfortable with, maybe one that my current team have experience in so that I can go faster around it. I think MEDDPICC has definitely had a big resurgence recently because Andy White's done a good job of writing a book and creating a lot of noise. And so there's a lot of AEs that know and understand this, but you'd have said the same thing 10 years ago about Challenger, or 20 years ago, you'd have said the same thing about Spin, and they're still in existence. So they all kind of do the same thing. I would find one that resonates for me, because ultimately you've got to live and breathe this. So you've got to feel comfortable with the language, with the culture of it, if that makes sense. And one way you think that you can deploy it and own it and feel good about it. So
got it.
That would be my advice.
We have a lot of attendees. Like, if you could in the chat, which methodology are you using? Write it out. We can see a little bit what is the most used one. Ourselves, we're using MEDDPICC. To be honest, I was a little bit afraid of, are we doing it too complicated? Are we actually implementing things for the buyer that makes it even harder to choose us as a provider? For example, like, one part is the legal and the paperwork. I was like, but for these deals, maybe we don't need to bring it up. So how do you think about that? Even if you're using MEDDPICC, I think you should still be able to, like, okay, maybe we'll not spend so much time on this or on that. And yeah, maybe they're ready to buy. Why get stuck in paperwork? Or what's your take on it?
Well, before we go on to that, I love it, because I was just quickly reading the questions, and I think you're absolutely right. And I'm glad you've started the debate, and we should go into this in a moment. So they're not all the same, I agree. And if you look at the whole list of 40, they're definitely not all the same. But if you think about what are you trying to achieve, which is, if you're trying to achieve a framework to allow your sellers to understand where you are in a process, or a framework for better discovery, that's where you need to make your determination. I would say, though, that some of them definitely do the same thing. But this comes back to the whole point around, you need to find out what problem you're solving for and find something that fits to it. Everyone is talking here about MEDDPICC being the way forward. MEDDPICC actually position themselves as not being an overall sales methodology, but a discovery methodology. So back to the point that you're saying here, methodologies are not all the same. They're not. What are you trying to solve for? And then find one that works. But my point is, that whole principle of you're trying to find a framework to work within, that is the same. You've then got to pick something that you're most comfortable with.
Got it. Yeah, I love that someone gets a little bit angry at us here, and actually, but I like that. More of that. So implementing and maintaining a sales methodology is maybe the hardest thing. I feel like sometimes you go in, and that goes with everything, implementing a tool, whatever. It comes down to, like, okay, we have chosen something, then what do we do? And I feel like, and you can add on top of it, the only thing that I'm certain of, that is that you will fail. If you haven't done it before, you will fail. We implemented objectives and key results. We failed first year. We failed halfway through the second year. And the third year, we managed, but we were persistent. So I think the persistency is key.
Yeah.
And get your sales reps, key sales reps, to adapt it, because that has been very successful. Kind of doing a POC kind of internally. Okay, but hey, let's have these reps. If they like it, everyone else will like it because they're reaching quota, right? And then one thing that last thing that I think is train, and not train from something that you travel with, but training all the time. Like, and that's often where we miss, because it's a new habit. It's like a football team. You don't just play games all the time. Like, you need to educate yourself and train. What do you have anything to add on top of that?
I would completely endorse your last point, which enable. It's the same thing. You know, RevOps was one of the hardest functions to hire for a few years ago. I think one of the most important things to be hiring for at the moment is enablement resource at the moment, because we need to train people time and time again. We need to really make this part of your DNA, part of the process. And only when it becomes part of that inherent sales motion do you start to get the value out of it. So you're right. And funnily enough, I was consulting for a business not so long ago, and we were talking about, you know, the sales process and how it was going. And you know, I talked about MEDDPICC, and we were talking about discovery methodologies. And they said, oh yeah, but we've done that. We rolled that out a year ago. And then I asked around the room, who knows that we rolled this out a year ago? This was in an offsite. And not a single person apart from finance who'd paid for it knew that we rolled this out a year ago. And therefore, that was just felt that a one point in time training course on MEDDPICC was going to be enough to then change your sales culture. It has to be embedded in everything that you do.
Yeah, and it goes down to the leader to make sure that isn't, because as a leader, sometimes you're like, oh, I have done it, let's go forward to the next thing. But then one thing that we discussed, and I see a question here actually from GetAccept, and I think they want us to be a little bit more precise in what to do here. And we discussed this part about, I call it deal hour, you call it deal review. And I really saw that being successful at our end. So is there anything you want to do? I can recommend this. You more or less have this 1 hour where you invite your team. And the whole thing is about someone or some people from the team bring a real deal that you are now trying or struggling with. You get into the room, you have the full team there, you have the methodology as a base, and then you discuss, okay, what have we done so far? Have we talked to the right stakeholders? How have we interacted with them? How can we communicate them with them more? Is the mutual action plan filled out? Where are we missing? What can we do to move the deal forward? And it really helps because 1, you train the methodology, 2, you move 1 deal maybe or 2 deals forward, and 3, you do it together as a team, which then gets everyone around this topic and the methodology. I can really recommend that. Have you anything similar that you have been doing?
I do exactly the same thing. In every organization that I've worked in, I endorse the whole concept of a big deal review. And actually, I get more focused on what I call the big deal reviews to really understand where we are on the ones that move the needle, but it needs to be part of the weekly sales motion, that this is happening all the time in the way that you describe. And I do the same thing. So I invite people on a call where, again, there's a framework, there's a structure as to how we talk about the opportunity, the size of it, what problems are we solving, you know, have we implicated the pain, who are the key stakeholders, we do a stakeholder map. And again, do the same thing, that it's not just a small group of people and the person who's selling. We get the whole team on so they all learn from this. But if you don't have that common language, common framework, common structure, honestly, those big deal reviews turn into an absolute mess because people just do it their own way with their own sales process and philosophy. And you've got structure, and it's all about just putting structure into people's lives to make their lives easier and to allow people to help them to move deals forwards.
Yeah. We got a comment there and disagreement, and again, love it about training, and of course, training where there are gaps is maybe preferable. If you know everything about X, of course, you don't need to train it. But sometimes you need to train someone else about X because they don't know it. So then your kind of expertise can get training to others. I wanted to do a little bit of a demo, John, beware with me and everyone else. So this is GetAccept. So I will show a couple of things and get your comments on it, because I know we have a lot of customers who've been asking for more demos in GetAccept. So what we're looking at here is GetAccept. we'll take a look at the resources and the library of all content. Think of it as this is where you have all your content, your information about the product, etc. For example, here I have product information. We'll talk about mutual action plans soon. So if we're selling anything on the feature of mutual action plan, here are information about that. And this is saved, and I can then see who is using it and so on. If I want to add things, of course, I can do that. Being a template manager, I can say, okay, I want to say something about map results. I'll want to add an image. I do that very quickly here, and so on and so forth. So it's all about having that content available for your reps, right? But what I think is the most interesting part is maybe going down to, okay, we have the content, but we also have rooms. And rooms are a combination of content. So right now we're looking at the room template, and this template then, of course, can support you following a process. Like if you have a discovery session, maybe that is a part of the room, which also then can be presented for the buyer. So in discovery, we have this agenda. This is what we'll walk through, reminding you as a rep to do these things, but also making sure that we do them with the buyer. You can collect the information from service, etc. But one thing that I really like that has been implemented is this part of, okay, let's say that we want to help the rep to choose something connected to the solution, being, for example, integration information. So when we sell, we integrate to the CRM, Salesforce, HubSpot, Pipedrive, you name it. And if I want that to be presented, I can tell them, okay, but this is the one, because they can use one of the other. So I can add something called a placeholder, and a placeholder then can be a guidance to the rep using this room. So in this case, I want to add integration information. So I go in here and I pick my resources which are about integration. I add them here and I say to the rep, like, choose the integration which fits with the CRM they use, for example. And that can be other information. You can add placeholders, being that you want them to record a video, etc. And then, of course, then when we are using this template, we go and we are a standard rep. We choose to create a room. We choose our template. And as you saw, there can be different templates for different industries. Add Acme Inc. here as a standard one. And boom, I have this room, which now is filled with content based on what we're selling, but also guidance. For example, one guidance being, hey, you should add a video. We talked about being personal, right? John, you're a big favor of creating relationships. So I can record a video and say, hey, John, this is me, Samir. We talked to the phone. This is our room where we'll spend all the time as I guide you to increase your hit rates. I look forward to that. If there's anyone you want to invite, please do that to the room and they can be a part of this. And that is what welcomes everyone to the room. But also as we go through this, as you see, I can then enable certain steps. So the solution, let's fully view, or let's fully show everything that is on solution. When I am at that stage, they are talking about the Salesforce integration. So that is what I want to use. And boom, we have information which is connected to the Salesforce integration. Based on what you now saw, John, what do you think, like, how can we then with this support the use of a methodology, do you think?
So I think this comes back to some of the comments that have been put in the chat, which I agree with completely, by the way, which is about putting methodology into the process and into CRM so that people are guided through using the right tools and asking the right questions and gathering the right information. So I think what you're now showing us is how do we then take this forward to the part of the sales process where we are providing a contract, or we're supplying the collateral, or putting the pricing. And again, I think it gives the framework and the infrastructure to support it, because we all know the moment that we send that email after we've done the presentation and they've asked for a copy of it because they want to take it through with other stakeholders, or, you know, we've got to the point where we have to provide pricing in an email, it gets lost in the ether. It goes into that black hole of it's now gone. We've got no tracking. We've got no clue what's happening. We've got no clue who's interacting with it. So we don't know where we are in our sales process, or we've got no visibility into the next step of our sales process. And then clearly you've got a tool here that allows you to keep that framework intact and to keep moving things forward. So look, I think this is great. And I think, it's the same as people were putting in the comments, as I say, it provides the tool to provide the structure for the methodology and the process.
Yeah, no, I agree. And thanks for sharing. And one thing that we have seen with this is like, we have always been the kind of approach to be the user friendly. So we kind of sometimes forget, even the managers, and we want the users to have fun doing sales. And what we've got as a feedback is like, one, it helps me to do the right things. It helps me to not forget. It's quite easy. It goes quick. Of course, that is fun for everyone. But in the end, you also get that feedback. Hey, who has been viewing? Who did now enter the room? Was that a new person? Oh, the CFO is viewing the business case, which I added yesterday. Oh, let's hope for that to get to the next step. But then also you can get them into the loop. You can start chatting with them in the room, etc., etc. So I think the part of making it fun is important, of course.
Just the final piece, as a buyer as well as a seller of technology, I've bought using digital sales rooms. And what I like is it's just a one place where everything sits, because stuff gets sent to you, you've been presented and you can't find it. Where is the most up-to-date pricing? What is the presentation with the ROI that I want to share with the CFO? I just like the fact that it's a repository that as a buyer, everything's in one place.
No, of course, and it simplifies for the buyer. The buyer experience is important. So let's leave methodology to the side. Let's see if we can create as much agreements and disagreements when it comes to mutual action plan. Or maps, or what is it called? Like, what do you call the mutual action plan? Anyone can write in the chat. Are you using a mutual action plan or anything else called similar collaborative success plan or evaluation plan or whatever? Please write it in the chat. So, John, to the question, let's sort it out. Mutual action plan. What should it be called?
I don't care. I really don't care. And I know, we've covered on this before and talked about, all these different acronyms and names for it. I really don't care what it's called. What I think is important through it is
what is it, Benda?
Okay. Well, first of all, maybe this will better explain what it is. All right. So mutual action plan is exactly what it says on the tin, which is something that's agreed between two parties with a set of actions that's getting you to an outcome. All right. And therefore, I think so long as you come up with something that does that, it's irrelevant what you call it. But I do think there's two important aspects to it. Number one is it's something that you're doing together. Therefore, the word mutual, collaborative, joint, partnership, I think they're good words. I don't think it matters which one. And then I think the word that has to be in it is action. Because ultimately, what are you trying to do here? You're trying to make sure that everybody completes a series of actions that gets you to an outcome. And the outcome is the one that you've agreed you want to get to with a date. And therefore, that's what you're trying to do. So what you call it, I don't care. But this is part of the process of getting out of that black hole of, I've sent something over, I don't know what's going to happen next. If you've got a mutual action plan, you're very clear as to what's happening next. You're holding your customer accountable for what they're doing. You're holding yourself and your own team accountable for what you're doing to get to the agreed outcome.
Yeah, I agree. And on this topic, is the mutual action plan only for big deals, do you think, like, or enterprise deals? Because that is what I have experienced, at least. But I kind of argue that it always isn't. But what's your take on that? Can you use a mutual action plan on those smaller deals?
So I think maybe this is where we might differ slightly, because and actually I'm loving the chat's going to blow up in a minute as well, which is good. I love there's some really good people on here with some great opinions and some great perspectives. I think it's for more complicated, kind of sales, where you've got lots of things that need to happen, and therefore you want to make sure that you're tracking those. So I think it is for a more complex sale, whether bigger, it doesn't really matter. But I think where there's numerous different objectives and activities that need to take place, you can map it. Yeah. I would argue in the efficient selling world, maybe it's not the best use of time to do this for something that's a bit smaller and transactional. Yeah.
But I kind of agree when you say it, but I also disagree. I bought solar panels myself last year. And I got like these, I contacted, of course, many. And the one that I chose was actually doing more of a mutual action plan with me. Not in GetAccept, but more like just presenting, oh, this is what will happen now. So we will, before you even get the quote and get price, we will do X, Y, Z together. And you need to prepare X, Y, Z. You need to like take a photo of your roof. You need to give us the coordinates. You need to do X. You need to tell us if we can access the roof. All those things that maybe then tells what they will price, because they maybe need a lift, they maybe need just the stairs or whatever. And that just brought so much trust to the process, because everyone else was just sending prices. Okay, we see your roof is blah, blah, blah. Here's the price. And nothing happened. Where this one took my hand and kind of, this is how you implement solar panels. So I really felt like maybe they were doing a little bit extra work, but it built so much trust to me. And that's the one that I chose, not based on that they were the cheapest one. Yeah. So I'm kind of arguing you can do it still in smaller deals.
I hear what you're saying. I think it depends on the complexity. And in those instances, maybe not be calling it an action plan, but more of a, an implementation plan. But again, you can always spin those even when it's a software sale, is that, I think someone put in the chat, you definitely want to be calling it, you don't want to be calling it like a close plan, because I completely agree. This isn't about closing something. It's about getting to a mutual success at the end. So it's all about phraseology, it's all about positioning, and it's all about the value that it brings.
Yeah, I agree. So if anyone wants to work with mutual action plans, we have built a little bit of a framework, not to use with your customers, but actually how you should think about building out a mutual action plan. And John, maybe you have some insights here, and you can talk while I'm showing here later. But like, let me know if you want this framework. Just ping us. We will share it with you. Maybe you team here behind the scenes can share it already now. And this is more like telling you, okay, how should I start? How should I think about creating those key phases and milestones, etc., etc. And if you don't want to use GetAccept for mutual action plans, you can actually just use a standard Excel sheet. I think if you would ask 10 companies who use mutual action plans, 8 will say, hey, we have a Google slide or a Google deck or a Google Sheets presentation or Excel. So you can also then, we will share this one also, team behind the scenes here, please share it. And this will just do the work. It will not do all the work, but will do some of the work. So exactly, you can fill out the task that needs to be done, and it will draw nice Gantt sheets for you. But what I wanted to show also is inside of GetAccept. So when you share a room can be based on, let's say, an industry. In that certain industry, you want a certain plan or size of deal or whatever. And here you can then see, okay, here we have an action plan, which is connected to the room. And as I then invite people to this room, let's say I want to invite you, John Bass, I have you here, done. I can now start adding you to those different tasks. So let's say I want you really to schedule, let's see here, schedule, create the need assistant document. Let's say this is something that John should do. And we need to get this done by Friday because you want to be up and running on the 31st. And what will happen now is, one, John will, of course, get information about what he is responsible for. And we will share that. As you say, it's mutual, so everyone can go in and see this. And John can also invite others. If maybe John isn't the one who should do it, we could say, okay, it's Roger. Let's have Roger do this instead. If it's an IT thing, maybe you need to vet if your IT structure is the right for us to be able to implement it. That can be a part of the solution part. And as we go on, you will see then that we check off things and people are getting reminders about it. So I think the difference here is much around, okay, are we getting reminded? Are we having a tool? Are we having everything at one place? And then that simplifies. What do you think about this, John, using this as a part of the process for you?
So I like it because it's got to be a two-way street. Because again, the things I've seen over the years have horrified me, where I've seen mutual action plans, which is just a list of the things that the customer needs to do in order to hit the salesperson's deadline of the end of the quarter. And it's so one-sided that the whole mutual action plan just backfires and it blows up in your face. I think what I like about this is it's collaborative. I think it gives the customer the opportunity to add things, to set the timelines, to delegate. It's a proper project plan, which is what a professional buyer would expect. So I think, look, it's a great tool. Again, I think it's about enabling people to use it appropriately, because if you do start using it as a stick to hit people with, to hit your quarterly cycle, it will backfire. Has to be two-way. You have to let the customer put the timelines in. Even if the timelines don't work for you, you then have that conversation about how do you then do things to accelerate those.
And that's an interesting thing, because some people is telling me like, okay, but if you put timelines, I mean, you can just move them. It's so easy. Look, so how do you think about that? Because moving them is easy. You can just set another date and then it's moved.
To
And our
point?
reps have sometimes hard with actually facing, okay, but what should I do about it? They just moved it. Who cares? Whatever. What's your strategy there? I have one. Let's hear yours.
Well, that was to your point at the beginning of that slide you showed. What's on everybody's mind at the moment, or what's the biggest challenge, is deal slippage, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's seeing deals slip. So I think the important thing here is to agree your go live date, because you're trying to fulfill a particular, you're trying to achieve something. So what is it you're trying to achieve? Make sure that it's clear with the customer what they want to achieve and by what deadline.
Yeah.
What is the strategic imperative you're solving for, and then work backwards. So in order to achieve this date, these are the things we need to do. And by the way, we're going to hold ourselves accountable that if we miss any of these, that deadline date's going to shift. And is that going to cause you a problem? And if it is going to cause you a problem, let's make sure we achieve this. And then we're all working towards the same date that's been agreed at the beginning. Again, there's nothing worse than suddenly introducing a close date because it suits the salesperson halfway through the process. Oh, by the way, did I not mention that this needs to be closed by the end of June? Well, sorry, I don't need it closed by the end of June. My project goes live in September. Agree that early on and then work to those deadlines.
No, I think you're totally right. And one thing that I've seen successfully is actually then moving the dates. Like if someone says, okay, but this will move the date. Okay, no worries. Let's also move the deadline date from September to October now. And they will go, no, we need to be there in September. I was like, yeah, but we just moved something else. And suddenly that gets so real when you use a mutual action plan, while just saying it, in a call. If we move that, it will move to October. They will go, yeah, whatever. But when something gets so physically that you move it, it will get like, oh, this is for real getting moved. No, that doesn't work. So that's my take on it also.
And agreed. And that comes back to stakeholder mapping that you're doing next time. If you understand who's interested in what dates and for what reasons, it's not just it's going to get moved. What will be the implication on, this stakeholder if it moves to that date? And being able to use that is super important.
Yeah. So we have a couple of questions here from the crowd. Let's see. We had some pure like GetAccept question when we will blur the background like here. I'll post it forward. So let's see. I don't have a date for that. We shared the Google Deck. Is there anything helping customer remember, reinforce? We had this, we already said about close plan. There was a question. I'm in a country where deal rooms are rarely used and people are still printing PDFs for proposals. What's the best way to introduce a new prospect to deal rooms? Good question. I get it very often, but if you would be that, I was about to say old person who wants to have a PDF printed, John, and I want to convince you, how do you think I would convince you the best to actually go in and use this deal room instead?
I think it's about just convincing of the benefits of the visibility that everybody gets around this. So look, there's clearly visibilities for the salesperson as part of this process. That's without doubt. It's what are the benefits for your buyer? And really making sure that they understand the benefits of being able to then use the collateral to gain buy-in from relevant stakeholders, to have visibility. You can use it as a platform even to chat. So I think it's just about having that central repository of truth is the benefit. But look, it's about benefit selling. What is the benefit for a buyer that doesn't want to use this tool to use this tool? Show them what the benefits are. And look, worst case, if they don't want to use it, fine. You might find an antiquated buyer that wants to work in a different way. Well, then it's all about understanding the implications of if you're buying that way, what could go wrong and what you're not going to get.
Yeah. No, but I think what we have experienced is like sometimes in those countries, or if it's industries where they may be more looking to do it the old-fashioned way, is that yes, that's often the case, but as soon as you get them into the room and when they experience that part of actually seeing, hey, everything is gathered in one place. Hey, I actually am talking to someone. Oh, that discussion that we had is saved in here and not in 5 different emails. and I don't have to chase different Google Drive links to find data or files or whatever. It's actually simpler for me. I think that experience, it's if you create that good first experience for them, the coin like falls down, and they agree on it directly. Like, and I think it's about trying, and of course, if you meet a stubborn person, that person doesn't want. Often a he, I would say, at his 50 age. Now I'm doing a bit like ranting here, but then yeah, maybe it's tough. But let's see. Cool.
There's a question here, which I'm happy to answer very quickly, about top 3 sales methodologies that he's used over the years. I think these are generational. I think, different things come into vogue at different times. I remember years ago, I was on Miller Hyman, I think, and was it like green sheets and blue sheets and all of that stuff? I mean, again, it was a process. It was a methodology. It was about using the right language. It was about mapping. More recently, over the last 10 years, there you go, I've got them to hand. I've used Challenger. Again, this is about taking control, being the challenger, although relationships are important. That one was much about, how do you take control and how do you challenge? But, I think I'm preaching to the converted on this one, but I got converted to MEDDPICC probably about 6 or 7 years ago. And this is what I've been using all the time over the last sort of 6 or 7 years. I think it provides a really good discovery framework. I think there's a lot you can do with that. And what I like about it more than anything at the moment is there's so many other people that understand it, know the language, that you don't have to start from scratch. I also find it very easy to implement within CRM and into your sales process as well, as people were talking about earlier. There you go.
I think the part of having people on the team who already knows about it simplifies it a lot. Like we had around MEDDPICC, and yeah, it made it so much easier. A question from me then: can you run multi methodologies at the same time?
I'm sure you can. I've never done it.
Okay. I was thinking, like, if you have different sales teams, could one run Spin and another MEDDPICC? Because I've heard that a couple of times. Like, okay, but we're using Spin and then we're using Bant, or we're using this and then we're using that on enterprise deals.
Yeah, but now you're talking about things that aren't necessarily methodologies. Bant is different. That's a qualification methodology. So can you use Bant alongside MEDDPICC? Yes, you can, of course. I'm a big believer in simplicity, all right? And I'm also a big believer in how do you get your entire company speaking the same language so that you can leverage your whole team in a deal? And I think that needs simplicity. So yes, of course, you can have multiple methodologies and multiple different things. Personally, I'm a fan of simplicity.
Cool, thanks. I think that should round it up, John. We have some attendees who've been popping off here. Next week, we'll have a similar, but on stakeholders, which I think is my favorite one, because I love identifying stakeholders, working with them and building that relationship. It's kind of magic when it works. So we'll talk about that next week on the 21st. It will not be with you, John, unfortunately. We'll have some other guests joining, but maybe you can buzz in. On top of that, we also said for everyone who wants to start using Dealroom, it's kind of a new category, right? It's kind of unknown grounds. So we also said anyone who wants to start using that, we will give them 25% off buying GetAccept and trying it out. We'll also make sure that you get onboarded properly. So we'll actually give you the onboarding for free if you choose GetAccept going forward. So we'll post that on the email, and all the information that you've seen here, the recording, the different slide decks, the Google Sheets, and so on will also be posted there. So if you missed anything, you'll get it. Okay. I think that's about it.
I'm definitely coming to the next one because I've now learned with all the people on the chat that you can like banter away and you can be more challenging on the chat than you can anywhere else. So thank you for the chat, and congratulations to whoever won the swag. There's also a good incentive next time to ask great questions and then you get swag. So I'm doing that.
For next time. I'll send one to you also, John. Thanks for joining in, and thanks everyone for joining. Wonderful to have you here. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.